Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. I'm broadcasting here live from the beautiful Californian coast, and I've had a bit of time to think on the aeroplane coming over here. And I've been thinking, this Prime Minister wasn't actually elected at a general election. And I thought back to when Gordon Brown took over from Tony Blair. I don't think that unless you've won a general election, that you actually command the respect or have the real mandate to lead the country. And let's face it, what Theresa May has to do is a truly historic task. All the obstacles have been cleared. Article 50 finally is going to be triggered. And she's got a massive job, not just negotiating with the European Union, not just opening us up to the rest of the world, perhaps starting with the United States of America, but equally going through hundreds of thousands of pages of EU legislation to work out what bits can be removed to help our small and medium-sized businesses. It's a big job, and I think she needs a general election to give her that mandate. But add to that what happened today when the Electoral Commission have fined the Conservative Party the maximum legal fine for willfully overspending and breaking election expenditure limits in by-elections and the general election. Of course, I know something about this because the biggest accusations concern a certain constituency in Kent in which I stood in 2015. And I certainly got the impression then they would do anything to try and stop me. They would do anything to try and win the other by-elections. Frankly, my view is they behaved as if they were above the law. And I don't think that's a very good tag to have around the Conservative Party. So what she can also do is she can get rid of the miscreants, she can apologise for the way the Conservative Party under David Cameron behaved, and she can say, I'm going to clean the stables. It is going to be honest, clean, straightforward politics, and that could be part of her general election pitch. I think the time has come for her to call a general election. I really do. I wonder what Robert in Medway thinks. Robert, good evening.
Hello. Well, as we had to deal with a buy here that we've now been told that we were right, that they did overspend, and obviously yes, during the general election they overspent here apparently, and in
just
your
Robert, can I just stop you a second? Listeners, what Robert's referring to is the fact that in September of 2014, Mark Reckless, who was the Conservative Member of Parliament for Rochester and Stroud, left the party, joined UKIP, and as a matter of honour, resigned his seat and forced a by-election. And it was during that by-election, and this is what Robert's talking about, it was during that by-election, and I was there, I visited Rochester and Stroud 9 times during that campaign, and the sheer scale of the Conservative operation, let alone the phone calls that were coming into people's houses from call centres in America, it was pretty obvious, Robert, wasn't it, that they were spending above the limit?
It was, well, yes, it was amazingly obvious around the area, and during the general election, it sort of seemed very thin on the ground at first, and then the last 2 weeks, it was just like everywhere there was a Conservative activist, and yeah, there was huge amounts of money and resources put into this area.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't do much for the reputation of politics, does it, if people willfully break spending limits?
No, and I don't think, quite frankly, the right punishment is going to go ahead and be done, because personally, a £70,000 fine doesn't give back to the parties that lost out, like the amount of money that is spent in the general election campaign.
No, and frankly, Robert, what is £70,000 to the Conservative Party? Their returns for the last quarter of last year were nearly £4 million. So this is a party with an income of £10 to £20 million every year. A £70,000 fine, frankly, makes no difference, does it?
No, not at all. And this is why UKIP, I think, we need to be having the motto, if you want real change, we are the party.
Yep, Robert, I get that. Is it time? Should she call a general election and clean out the stables?
I think that it probably is time for her to do that, but I don't think it's the best time for us at the moment. We will win seats, we know that, but I think for Yeah.
I tell you what is for certain. I tell you what is for certain. It wouldn't be a very good time for the Labour Party, and she would have quite an opportunity to get herself a majority. Robert, I thank you. I thank you for your call and for your insight as to what you saw in that Rochester and Stroud constituency. Anne in Belfast. Good evening, Anne. Is it time for a general election?
Well, I was going to ask you that, Nigel, because I'm not sure. And by the way, congratulations. Do you think it's a good time for a general election? It's just that UKIP's not in the strongest of positions at the minute. You know,
well, I wasn't arguing, Anne, with you or with Robert, who called earlier. I wasn't arguing this purely from a UKIP perspective. What I was saying was that, frankly, I mean, there are at least 12 constituencies, OK, that have been identified in this report. And who knows, it could be more than 20. If next week the police and the Crown Prosecution Service decide to take what the Electoral Commission have said, there could be a whole mass of by-elections that need to be held this year. You know, we had the expenses scandal a few years ago. I don't think confidence in politics and politicians is very high at all. And I think Theresa May's got a chance to say, look, whatever happened under Osborne and Cameron has gone. That's history. I'm now running the Conservative Party. I'm your Prime Minister. I'm going to obey the law, obey the rules, make sure we have clean politics, but also I need a mandate, really, to lead the country through this Article 50 process. So I'm not arguing it for anyone's advantage or disadvantage. What I'm saying, Anne, is that I think in the interests of cleaning out the stables and giving people honest politics, I think it's time to have a general election.
Nigel, if I thought that it would wipe out the Labour Party and the Lib Dems, I'd be all for it, but I'm not so sure.
Well, you're arguing it from a party political perspective. I mean, let's put it like this, Anne. I don't think Mr. Corbyn, he will say he welcomes a general election, but I genuinely don't think he would. But I think for the country, I do believe that particularly at this moment in time, as we're on the verge of triggering Article 50, she needs a mandate to carry that process through. That's my view. I wonder, Adam in Sheerness, do you think I'm wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong about wanting a general election, but to say that she hasn't got a mandate because nobody voted for her, I think is wrong. We vote for local MPs, and they, whoever commands the majority in Parliament forms a government. And until we have proportional representation, which I'm all for, the system's never going to change like that. But however, the general election point that you made, spot on. We need to clear out the stables of all these pro-European MPs that are in Parliament that clearly do no longer represent the views of most of their constituencies in England and in Wales. And it's a really good idea. And not only that, with this election scandal coming down the river, it's a good opportunity for her to turn and go, look, I agree with you, Nigel, actually. Under David Cameron and Osborne, it wasn't honest. I'm different. I'm a different breed, and I'm calling an election out of, of honour. That's what I think.
Adam, that is exactly how I feel about this. As for your bigger point, of course, technically, you're absolutely right. We don't vote for a Prime Minister. We vote for a local MP. But I would say this to you. I think over the last 20 years, effectively, our system has become almost presidential. And we tend to vote for parties or against parties because who the leader is.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's the way it's become. And I do think that Gordon Brown, having taken over from Blair, never quite had the credibility of somebody who's led their party and won a general election. Adam, I thank you very much for your call. Your texts and tweets coming in. Nigel, the PM does have the authority to lead without a general election. We do not have a president but a prime minister who leads the government who won the election. That's from Martin in Farnham. Well, Martin, again, it's exactly the same point that Adam just made, but I actually think now, effectively, we almost have a presidential-style system. No general election needed. Full steam ahead for Brexit, says Alan from Brighton. Well, actually, Alan, if she fought the general election and won a majority, clearly stating what she would do under the terms of Article 50, I think actually maybe Brexit could go ahead even more quickly. Perhaps that would stop further legal challenges or goodness knows what else. Scots don't all want to split from the UK. Some of us, but not all. Sadly, the few who do shout the loudest. Well, that's the other issue, isn't it? She's got Nicola Sturgeon constantly asking for a referendum. And again, she fights and wins wins a general election on the basis that there'll be no referendum needed, and that would be a good thing in my view. I'm going to go to John in Carmarthen. John, tell me, is it time for a general election?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I know the area of Thanet like the back of my hand. I lived there for 50 years. You can put one of the donkeys up. Long as it had a blue label, it would have been voted in. And I was with you the night in Broadstairs when you spoke the night of the election. The trouble is, you've got the Old Boys Network, and they were frightened to death of you that night. And they
well, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, John. You know, you're right about the Thanet thing, but this also happened in Rochester and Strood. You know, it also happened in the Newark by-election, which I saw face-to-face. I mean, frankly, and let's not pretend that other parties in by-elections at times over the years probably didn't overspend a bit too. So I think almost there's been some kind of a truce on this. And you know, the Electoral Commission have been around for 15 years. As far as I'm concerned, to date, they've done nothing. What they've done today is quite dramatic, John, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it should have been 1 million, but I know they couldn't do that. But I think it's time for an election on the grounds that everyone is fed up of going zigzag, zigzag, zigzag for the last 9 months. And we need some sort of leadership, which we don't seem to have. Yeah. Well, I think it would clear the air. I think there could be no argument, particularly on things like the single market, where we got Tony Blair and the others telling us, oh, no, or Nick Clegg, you know, all our favourites. We didn't vote to leave the single market. Well, if she fights a general election and wins on that ticket, then it makes it absolutely clear. And I think a lot of these people, John, frankly, would stop bleating. John, who agrees with me that the time now is right for us to have a general election. And it could happen on the first Thursday of May because already all the English counties are voting on that day. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC, here from sunny California. Right now, it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Unpopular, unworkable, unsustainable, and actually unbelievable. The announcement in last week's budget, which was clearly going to be a disaster, finally dismantled yesterday. Quentin,
Perhaps he'd forgotten the manifesto, or else he thought, well, let's not worry about seeming to break our manifesto promise. You can't do that in politics.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, making you welcome at over 40 hotels in Europe.
Now, I can tell you the secrets of successful investors, but the golden rule is you have to act quickly. Now, you're obviously a decisive person, someone who stays ahead of the curve, someone who
could be drawn in by the time pressure of an investment scammer. At the Financial Conduct Authority, we're committed to keeping you safe. So if you've been offered an unsolicited investment opportunity, be a scam-smart investor and check the FCA warning list of firms to avoid at fca.org.uk/scamsmart.
Do you have a pension? Maybe you've got more than one. How do you know if they're in the right pension funds, making as much money as possible for your retirement? Answer is, you probably don't. At The Pension Works, our fully qualified independent financial advisors could add instant value to your retirement fund. Simply text the word YES to 83222 for your free Pension Works health check. That's YES to 83222 today. Your pensions working harder with The Pension Works.
At Oak Furnitureland, everyone knows our furniture is 100% real hardwood.
And it's also 50% off.
But most importantly, it's 100% real hardwood.
Yes, but don't forget it's also 50% off.
Make sure you don't miss red hot savings at Oak Furnitureland, where everything's 100% real hardwood with up to 50% off. Our unmissable red hot savings end Sunday. Visit oakfurnitureland.co.uk to find your nearest store.
The family member who was concerned. The neighbour who felt uneasy. The teacher who was worried. The coach who noticed at practice. And you. Child abuse. If you think it, report it. Visit gov.uk/tackle child abuse to find out how. Together, we can tackle child abuse.
BT and Sky have just raised their prices yet again. If you're one of their broadband customers, you're probably not too happy about it. But did you know from when they tell you you have 30 days to leave your contract penalty-free? And when you switch to TalkTalk, we guarantee no price rises on any of our fixed price plans. Like our best ever savings on our totally unlimited fast broadband, just £20 a month including line rental, guaranteed for your whole 24-month plan. Saving up to £417 versus BT. It's for new and existing customers too. So switch today at talktalk.co.uk. TalkTalk, for everyone. Contracting conditions apply.
When it comes to finding something new, you can start the conversation at Hello You. Sign up and browse profiles for free at helloyoudating.com and start the conversation today.
Now, someone as decisive as you
could be drawn in by the time pressure of an investment scammer. Be a scam-smart investor. Check the FCA warning list before investing.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
After the Electoral Commission put the maximum ever penalty on the Conservative Party for willfully overspending in by-elections and a general election, I think it's time to clean out the stables. I think Mrs May needs to show there's a new kind of Conservative politics, that the old days of Cameron and Osborne are gone, and she should call a general election, which would then give her a mandate to take us through this crucial Article 50 negotiation. But before we get back to that, and whether you think I'm right or not, just a couple of little thoughts. I hope people found the Marine Le Pen interview interesting. I'm always struck that our opinions of people tend to be formed on what someone's written about them, or what someone says about them. And one of the points of that interview was to give you the chance to actually listen to what she has to say. And whether that makes you more pro-Le Pen or more anti-Le Pen, either way, I hope that served a useful purpose. And you'll have noticed there were elections in the Netherlands. And it's all being presented as a disastrous day for the Eurosceptics and a huge victory for the Prime Minister. Well, it's true. The Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, did win. And I think the big punch-up with Turkey, the riots that took place on the street in Rotterdam, I think all of that did actually help the Prime Minister. But just get one thing straight. You know, if you believe the media, they would have you think that the revolution of 2016 is all over and that actually Eurosceptic opinion is falling. The Dutch Prime Minister Rutte has been returned, but he lost seats in the election. Wilders, the Eurosceptic, and another new party gained seats, and the left of centre socialists were virtually wiped out. So actually, what has happened here is the establishment parties who were in the previous coalition have had an incredibly bad election. The pro-EU forces have had a rotten election. The anti-EU forces have gained ground. That it may not be as dramatic as it would have been if Wilders had topped the poll, but do not believe that narrative that you're getting from our state broadcaster and others. Right, back to the question, should there be a general election? And I'm going to Darwood. Is it Darwood in Dunfermline? Darwood, good evening.
Darwood in Dunfermline. Hello, Nigel. Yes.
Hello there.
Yeah, we certainly should for all sorts of reasons, but I'll just give you one.
Yes.
Today, Theresa May has said emphatically to Nicola Sturgeon that she can't have her second independence referendum. Now, that's fair enough, but one of the reasons she quotes is that Nicola doesn't have a mandate. Now, of course, Nicola does have a minority government in Scotland, but she certainly has a lot more of a mandate than Theresa May has, who hasn't been elected by anyone other than a handful of MPs. Yes. Now, it would give her a much stronger position to be able to turn down that referendum request if she'd actually have gone to the country herself and had her own mandate. So this will be one of a number of instances that would doubtless come up where she could, cut to the chase and get rid of all of that by just going to the country.
Well, I think you're right. And actually, in effect, it was a coronation, wasn't it? Because nobody else stood against her in the end. I mean, there was no need for a proper contest. So, no, I agree with you. I tell you what, stay there with me. I might need your help in a minute because I've got Hayden from Watford coming on who thinks I'm completely wrong. Tell me why, Hayden.
I don't think you're completely wrong. I think you're right generally that if any Prime Minister dies or is knocked off his throne for any reason, there should be an election because we are getting more presidential. I agree with you on that. But in this case, I just don't see the point. She's going to win anyway, and all the energy should be focused towards the EU now.
OK. David, how would you respond to Hayden? Help me.
I can only hear your side of the conversation, Nigel, so I don't know what he said.
Oh, right, OK. Right, OK. If we got some gremlins, we got some gremlins. Thank you. Hayden, all I can say to you is this, that I think Dawood made the point very well, that on the issue of a Scottish referendum, you know, Nicola Sturgeon is saying, look, I have a mandate to call for this. You're telling me I can't have it. Who voted for you? I think there are lots of reasons, Hayden, why actually now is a really good time, not least of which is what the Electoral Commission have said today about the actions and behaviour of the Conservative Party could lead to as many as 20 by-elections taking place over the course of this year. Given we may have a whole slew of by-elections, given that the whole of the English counties are voting on the first Thursday in May anyway, doesn't it just make sense for her to get a proper mandate?
I think you're getting a bit carried away saying could lead. I could win the lottery next week, but, you know, what are the chances of that? So you're
well, I tell you what, Hayden. Well, I tell you what, Hayden, they have, let's just be clear, you know, about what has been said here. You know, they've been fined the record amount of money, the maximum amount of money for breaking election expenses rules. And this is over several constituencies.
Yes, I know that. But all the parties got fined a certain amount of money. So you're saying it's okay for the Lib Dems to steal from a shop because they didn't steal as much from the shop as the Conservatives. Everybody's guilty of the same crime, so it's a bit rich.
I'm not sure.
Including your ex-party, by the way. So it's a bit rich to be pointing fingers.
I don't think.
And that's why that's why Labour's not very hush-hush and quiet about it and not making hay, because they're going to look pretty stupid standing up in Parliament and saying you stole from the shop, and the Conservatives will go, well, you did as well.
Well, I don't think, Hayden, I was ever accused in UKIP of overspending. I think the trouble I had most of the time was getting enough money to fight the campaign properly, but I was never accused of that. This, I think, I genuinely believe this is a damning judgment on how the last Conservative Party behaved, as if they were above the law. And actually, Hayden, it is actually quite serious for the Prime Minister as well, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the people in the middle of this is Nick Timothy, you know, who is the most important official that works for Theresa May in Number 10. There's another fellow called Stephen Parkinson too, who works within Number 10. So these are people who were part of a massive overspend in a constituency in which I was interested, and I think she's got a chance here. She's got a chance here to say, look, I'm different. You know, I'm going to bring you straight, honest politics. Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yes, it would be, but why does she have to have a general election to do that? You can't blame her for what happened on somebody else's watch. She wasn't captain of the ship then, so you're blaming the crew members for the crash of the Titanic on the iceberg. That's a little unfair on her, don't you think?
Well, she's got two people working within Number 10 who are certainly interested parties in all of this. And Hayden, you're right. She doesn't have to have a general election, but I think it would be a very good thing to clean out the stables and to give her the kind of mandate she needs for what could be, you know, some quite big, dramatic developments over the course of the next 2 years. Hayden, I thank you for your view. I'm going to ask Annette in Pinner. Annette, is it time for Theresa May to call a general election?
Yeah. I disagree. There should be no general election because we haven't got appetite for it, because she must concentrate on the getting out of Europe, as we all want her to do, as soon as possible. By having a general election will confuse the public, will anger the public, and people don't want any more general elections. And also because the Labour Party is weak, they will accuse her of taking advantage of it, which is wrong.
Well, they might well say that after the election. I don't think they'd use that argument during the election. Otherwise, they would almost be conceding defeat before the whole thing started. You may be right, Annette. You know, maybe there's not an appetite to have an election. I don't know. And I agree with you that actually getting us out of the European Union is the most important job. But part of the problem...
Indeed. So
Annette,
why confuse by asking for general election?
Because part of the problem that she's got is whatever she tries to negotiate, you've got, as I said earlier, you've got Tony Blair, you've got Nick Clegg, Lord Heseltine, all saying, no, we didn't vote in the referendum to leave the single market. Well, it's pretty clear to me that we did, but a general election with a clear manifesto would actually end all those arguments, end any potential legal challenges, and we would know exactly the direction in which we were going. And I think that, in terms of clarity in that, would be a good thing. That
Europe will think we're weak, that we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. Let's just concentrate on getting up from EU. And Nigel, we do, I'll buy you a drink in Pinna Pub, where you're supposed to be.
It will be a pint of best bitter, and I will look forward to it enormously. Annette, thank you very much. Your Facebook messages. Laura says, I think the Queen needs to dissolve Parliament. Well, she'll only do that if Theresa May asks her to. Paul says on Facebook, if we had an election now, we will be guaranteed 5 more years of Tories. Nobody else is currently electable. Paul, that may well be right. But I just think this Prime Minister is struggling a little bit for credibility. And I'm going to go to Barney in Norwich. Barney, is it time for a general election?
No, Nigel, I think you're going really out of the way on a subject which is to your heart, which is against the Conservatives. I personally think that I know lots of Brexiteers like myself, and we all admire you. And reality is, I think you're forgetting certain things. If she was to call a general election now, does she invoke Article 50 now, or she wouldn't be allowed to do that if she called the general election? She'd have to wait till after the general election, and whoever was the Prime Minister then, because she could have been kicked out by then, would they then either have to invoke the Article 50?
She can invoke Article... I mean, she's going to invoke Article 50 in a few days' time.
Right.
Anyway.
Then what does she put in her manifesto? We've just now spent 9 months saying that we mustn't give any information to the opposition in our bargaining chips. And now you're telling us why she can make a manifesto telling the public exactly what she's going to do and what she's going to achieve in her election. Negotiations.
She would have clarity on the single market, Barney. She would have clarity on the single market. I think it would strengthen her position. I think it would stop the whingers saying this isn't what we voted for. But above all, Barney, I think that British politics needs cleaning up. And perhaps, Barney, I'm getting a bit personal with this because perhaps I was at the centre of much of this alleged overspend. And we're going to find out next week what the Crown Prosecution Service think of all of this. So maybe you're right, Barney. Maybe I'm taking it all a little bit personally. I thank you for your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and coming to you from sunny California. Time for the news now with Rupert Bartier.
It's been confirmed the government won't enter negotiations with the Scottish government over a new independence referendum. Nicola Sturgeon says blocking the vote, which she wants held between autumn next year and spring 2019, would be a democratic outrage. French authorities are looking into whether a letter bomb sent to the International Monetary Fund in Paris is linked to an explosion at the German Finance Ministry. The letter reportedly had Greek stamps on it. And it's been announced that £12 million has been raised in 24 hours for the East Africa Crisis Appeal. The money will be used to provide emergency supplies to people who are starving in South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia and Kenya. LBC weather. Showers moving into most areas overnight, a low of 3 Celsius. Strong winds and rain tomorrow, a high of 13 degrees.
LBC Travel. Good evening. I'm Andy Lake. Well, the M4 looking slow if you're coming into London towards Junction 1 for the Chiswick roundabout. That's because of a collision which has partially closed the entry slip there. On the North Circular, queues approaching the A40 at the Hanger Lane Gyratory. That's all after an accident earlier on. All lanes are back open now, but there are still queues back to the M4. It's also affecting the A40 if you're heading to and from Savoy Circus at the moment. The M1 is crawling southbound. That's because of a collision that's closed the inside lane of 3 between the London Gateway services and Junction 2 for the A1 and the A41 at Five Ways Corner. Severe delays on the A14 still in Cambridgeshire this evening. It's solid eastbound heading towards Huntingdon. It's down to just one lane between the A1 and Brampton after an oil spillage earlier. It's taken over an hour to get from Spaldwick to the A1 all afternoon and evening. Onto the tubes now. The Piccadilly line still suffering severe delays from Acton Town to Heathrow and Uxbridge and between Arnos Grove and Cockfosters. That's because of a shortage of trains. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
All next week, LBC is running a special report on child protection with the Department for Education. Listen to Sheila Fogarty from 1 p.m. as she talks to experts and explores the role individuals can play in protecting children and young people from abuse and neglect. Together, we can tackle child abuse. If you think it, report it. For more information, head to lbc.co.uk.
Your future is here. The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Find out more at globalacademy.com.
Hello? The wait is finally over. The magic is about to begin.
What if she is the one?
Feel the music. Experience the thrill. And enjoy the wonder of the most enchanting cinematic event of the year. Feel it in your heart. In cinemas tomorrow.
When it comes to finding something new, you can start the conversation at Hello You. Sign up and browse profiles for free at helloyoudating.com and start the conversation today.
Divorce. It affects every part of your life. You, your family, your home, your finances. And if you're a man facing divorce, perhaps even one you don't want, the situation becomes even more complicated. It's at times like these that you need a professional you can trust. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordell.co.uk, office in central London. A partner men can count on.
The trouble with investing in cash ISAs these days is that you never seem to get a decent return. With today's high inflation and low interest rates, your money just doesn't reach its potential. At Money Farm, our experts can match you with an investment ISA that could give your money the chance to perform better. And right now, you could have your full ISA allowance looked after, free of management fees for a year if you transfer over £10,000. Visit moneyfarm.com. Your capital is at risk. Money Farm is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Save 15% with discount code MUM at zingflowers.com.
Zing flowers are amazing every time.
Did you know premium bonds have been around for 60 years? I recently won £100 in the monthly prize draw. I was off to the bank to deposit my prize warrant when my granddad came over. You know you can do all that online nowadays, he chuckled. And he was right. I now manage my premium bonds online, and I've chosen to have my winnings paid straight into my bank account. It's so much faster. You can too by visiting nsandi.com. Premium bonds, making people smile for 60 years.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So the Conservative Party have had their wrists very firmly slapped by the Electoral Commission for willfully overspending on by-elections and in some seats in the general election. It is the maximum fine that ELCOM can levy on them. And next week, who's to say, there may well be even criminal prosecutions. So this is serious. Serious for the reputation of the Conservative Party. Serious, I think, in terms of how people view politics in this country. Add to that the fact she hasn't really got a mandate, and she's having a big row with Nicola Sturgeon over who's got authority to give or not give permission for a referendum. I think everything says to me that she ought to have a general election and try and get herself a clear mandate. And I'm asking you, do you agree or disagree? And please call me on 0345 6060 973 and let me know what you think. But before I go to that, I want to give you an updated European story. As you will know, I have been fiercely critical of Mr. Juncker and particularly Mrs. Merkel for their asylum policy, which was announced 2 years ago, which basically was, as many of you as want to come can come. And I've been fiercely critical of that. I'm now, without giving you any opinion at all, just going to give you some up-to-date facts. OK, here we go. 1.2 million asylum seekers applied to stay in the European Union in 2016, a number almost exactly the same as it was the year before, and double that of 2014. Last year, there were 334,000 Syrians, 183,000 Afghans, 127,000 Iraqis, 47,000 from Pakistan, 46,000 from Nigeria. They're the big groups. But what's really interesting is 60% of the 1.2 million claims are being made in Germany. That's 722,000 people applying for asylum in Germany in 2016, which is up on the 500,000 or so in 2015. And Germany last year, looking after asylum seekers, cost the German taxpayer last year 22 billion euros. All right, so I haven't given any opinion. I've just given you the up-to-date facts. I'll give you an opinion now. The row with Turkey, the huge diplomatic spat with Turkey, means that the deal whereby billions of euros, 6 billion euros, were paid to Turkey to stop huge numbers of migrants coming across to Greece and elsewhere, that's now over. And I think with the summer coming, there are going to be very, very large numbers of people coming into Italy, coming into the Greek islands over the course of this summer. And I think this issue of the huge numbers coming to Europe, and although most want to go to Germany, what Germany now wants to do is to impose quotas on the other EU members. This, I think, will be the hottest potato in European politics over the course of the rest of this year. But please, if you think I'm wrong, if you think it is no problem at all, do ring and call me. Back to the question. Is it time for a general election? I believe that it is. I really, really do. I wonder what Jim in Wandsworth thinks. Jim, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes to a general election. I think it's absolutely imperative that she goes to the country. She will have a mandate much bigger than what she has at the moment, and that will give her 5 full years, 2 years to sort out the leaving of the European Union, and then the public will have another 3 years to assess the situation. By then, 6-term parliaments, 5 years' time, a new Labour leader will be there, and also it will really close all the doors and the avenues that all the whingers can go down either through the courts or via lobbying other people, and then you get the House of Lords, and it will speed things up. She will get an absolute mandate. But one caveat I'd add to this is that Nicola Sturgeon keeps saying in our manifesto we promised a referendum if the UK voted to leave the European Union. Theresa May should put in her manifesto, we will promise the electorate that if we get elected, we will not allow Scotland to have a referendum in the next Parliament. That will then get, as I said, going back to my previous point, the 2 years to negotiate without her hands being tied, and 3 years for the Scottish people then to decide whether they want a referendum in the following 5 years. My own view is that in the general election, Ruth Davidson will gain seats in Scotland and the SNP will lose some seats.
You may be right, Jim. You may be right. Ruth Davidson is certainly riding a bit of a wave of popularity in Scotland. Jim, I think you're right. She wins an election. As you say, she's got 5 years, 2 years to sort out the deal with the European Union, 3 years to open us up to the rest of the world. It would be a wonderful opportunity. She'd have a proper mandate to do it. The House of Lords couldn't complain about it because she would have been elected on that ticket. And let's face it, politics has changed in this country since the general election of 2015 because Brexit is the biggest political event of our lifetimes. Jim, I thank you for your call. An amusing text here. May would win a general election hands down and Corbyn would resign. That's why she won't call one. Keeping Corbyn as the useless opposition is preferable. That's what Dale in Chelmsford thinks. John in Hoddesdon says that Mrs May would call a general election soon if she was sure that you, Nigel, were not going to run in that election. She knows you'd walk it. Not sure about that, John, but it's very sweet of you. And one here that is really interesting. Hi, Nigel. Are you not worried that a general election at this time would become a second EU referendum? The Lib Dems did this in my constituency of Richmond Park and won this seat in the by-election, which previously had been solid Tory, and that's from James in Barnes. It's a very good question, James. I think that the Richmond Park by-election was a complete one-off, and I think voters do not like being asked to vote if they think it's unnecessary. And I think Zach Goldsmith, standing down, calling a by-election on the basis of the extension to Heathrow, the extra runway at Heathrow Airport. I think people saw that, frankly, as an unnecessary by-election, and he got punished for it. But you're right in one way, James, is that if there was a general election, the Lib Dems would try and make it into, we want to overturn the referendum result. You're right, they would, and in a way that's a good thing, because I don't think they do very well, personally, on that ticket. Charlie in Cardiff, is it time for Mrs May to call an election?
I think no, but actually I like your last comment there about voters not wanting to have an election that's unnecessary. Now, I support the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which is designed to stop Prime Ministers choosing to call an election when it suits them and giving them an unfair advantage. And in any case, parties are elected on a manifesto. So to use or extend the analogy of your earlier caller about the captain of a ship, if it's necessary to change the captain of the ship, you're not going to change the route. It's still going to go on the same course. And we've got that course set by the manifesto. So what I would like to see...
But Charlie, that's, in normal circumstances, I would totally agree with that. The captain may change and a Prime Minister could die or fall ill or, I get that. And the ship stays on the course, and that is the election manifesto. But the Tory manifesto of 2015 that Cameron won the election on, surely, now that Brexit's happened, it's almost meaningless, isn't it?
Well, he did say that he would have a referendum. And that was part of it. And this is why I would like actually to put a proposal to you. You say a small number of the seats are under question, which means the majority aren't. So in the majority of cases, it's unnecessary to hold them. So what I would like to see happen is for the legal procedure to carry its course, and if it means that those seats are declared questionable because of exceeding expenses limit, and they have to rehold them, that those seats are contested, and if the Tories lose their majority, then that would suggest that they didn't deserve to get in the first place, and that they should therefore cancel any major legislation, because, of course, if they hadn't got in, there wouldn't have been a referendum. So that calls into question the validity of the referendum.
Well, I don't quite buy into that, but I would say this to you, that whilst Cameron promised a referendum in his 2015 manifesto, he firstly didn't think he'd ever have to offer it because he wasn't really confident of getting a majority. It surprised him, I think, as much as anybody. And secondly, he didn't for one moment, and the people that drafted the Tory manifesto didn't for one moment think it was even possible that Brexit could win. And therefore, I don't think this ship knows actually exactly which course it's on, because I think that manifesto really needs to be updated hugely. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC from sunny California. It's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Ian Payne.
A second US judge has blocked Donald Trump's revised travel ban, and a Senate committee has rejected his claim his phone was bugged. Is it time for Mr. Trump to say, I was wrong?
Ian Payne on LBC.
The family member who was concerned. The neighbour who felt uneasy. The teacher who was worried. The coach who noticed at practice. And you. Child abuse. If you think it, report it. Visit gov.uk/tackle child abuse to find out how. Together, we can tackle child abuse.
Divorce. It threatens the things you've worked hard for in more ways than you can imagine. Your home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. Don't let divorce cost you any more than it has to. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
We got it at Selco. Selco, it's where the trade go.
At Selco Builders Warehouse, we got real deals in March. Like a Passload IM360 CI lithium-ion framing nail for an amazing £349.99 ex-VAT. With free next-day delivery when you buy online. Now that's a real deal. We've got even more real deals and thousands of products in stock at 25 Selco branches within the M25. See selcobw.com for your nearest branch.
We got it at Selco. Selco, it's where the trade go.
Hello? The wait is finally over. The magic is about to begin. What if she is the one? Feel the music. Experience the thrill. And enjoy the wonder of the most enchanting cinematic event of the year. Feel it in your heart. In cinemas tomorrow.
If you use your phone while you're driving and it's not hands-free, the penalty's been doubled. It's now 6 points and £200. The trouble is, a lot of us are addicted to our phones. So try this trick. Put your phone somewhere where you can't pick it up. Somewhere you can't see it. The glove compartment. That way, you won't be tempted. Save yourself 6 points and £200. Maybe even save a life. Make the glove compartment the phone compartment. Think. Put your phone away.
Did you know that half of all of Canada's grizzly bears call British Columbia their home? Book with Canadian Affair and tailor-make your trip with their expert Canada know-how. Celebrate Canada's 150th birthday and save up to £200 per person. Plus, get £150 of holiday vouchers per couple, with holidays departing direct from London. Get your Canada know-how with CanadianAffair.com. Sale ends April 3rd.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
The Electoral Commission slammed the Conservative Party and put the biggest fine they can possibly impose on a party for overspending, willful overspending in by-elections and in some seats in the general election. And the reputation of British politics is back in the gutter. And I think if you add to that the fact that this Prime Minister really needs a mandate and that the Conservative manifesto of 2015 upon which they were elected is frankly meaningless, given that Brexit's happened, I think for all those reasons the Prime Minister should call a general election, do it on the first Thursday in May, because the whole of the English counties are voting on that day anyway. I wonder what Freddie in Cambridge thinks of that proposition.
Nigel, I think it's just a bit of a risk too far to call a general election.
Right.
I mean, politics is risky, as you know.
Yes,
I mean,
I do.
Well, I'm talking to you. You've got far more experience than me. But as a sort of past agent and activist, I would say that you've got to weigh up the risks. I think this is just a bit too far for this reason. At the moment, we've got somebody holding the ball, rolling up the rugby pitch, going in the right direction, and we're probably going to get there. And if we allow ourselves to be blown off course by anything at all, however, culpable the present party has been, or members of it, if we allow ourselves to be blown off course, there's a serious risk that we might effectively change the whole direction and drop the ball. And I wouldn't like that to happen, because I think that is the main thing we have to stay by. I agree with everything you say about, the reputation of politics and so on. But let me tell you, years ago, when I was an activist, a Labour Party activist, in the year that they all thought that Neil Kinnock was going to win, and he didn't, I went to bed. For the first time in my life, I went to bed. I didn't stay up and watch the results because I had an important meeting the next day. I went to bed feeling so happy, so confident. In the morning, I felt like somebody who had gone into hospital to have my ingrown toenails clipped and had my bloody leg off. And sorry, I shouldn't swear. Sorry. But
You shouldn't,
that was
no.
a degree of shock. That was the degree of shock. And I think,
I mean, there is risk. Of course there's risk with anything like this, but there's also a risk, Freddie, that we get a whole slew of by-elections throughout the course of this year as constituency after constituency is judged to have been an invalid result. And we will then spend the rest of the year talking about how corrupt British politics is. And there's a chance here for the Prime Minister to clean out the stables, to say, I am going to do this differently. The bad old days are gone. We're going to stick to the rules and have honest politics. And I think that, Freddie, added to the fact that the last opinion poll I saw showed 68% of the British public want us to jolly well get on with leaving the European Union. I don't think it poses that much of a risk, but I take the point. You never know what can happen. After all, who thought Brexit would win? Who thought Trump would win? 2016 did prove, you're quite right, that surprises do happen. Tommy in Stockton-on-Tees, is it time for an election?
Oh, definitely, Nigel. I mean, I never voted for Theresa May. I never voted Conservative, and I don't want her as my Prime Minister.
Right. OK. But they did win the election, Tommy.
Well, the Conservatives won. Theresa May didn't win herself the election. So what I think we need to do is, because I vote the way my granddad told me to vote. So you vote for a leader who you find charming, charismatic, who you think's going to do well. I don't see that in Theresa May. She's taken too long this renegotiation with the EU. And she also defended Sharia law at one point. So we just need to have another general election. And maybe, just maybe, those 17 million people who voted for Brexit might just start voting for Brexit MPs to really put pressure onto the government to get us out of the EU sooner rather than later.
So you think, Tommy, if there was a general election, you think voters might use it to put pro-Brexit MPs in Parliament from whatever party they are, yeah?
Oh, no doubt. I think June the 23rd really woke up this British spirit of fighting foreign powers who want to impose their, backwards things onto us.
Yeah.
And we've got to keep that spirit alive. I think Theresa May, she's trying to crush it again so we could become a nation who's more controlled, just one who kind of complains at the pub. But we've got to keep this fighting spirit alive. And yeah, let's have another general election.
OK, so Tommy, who would you vote for in Stockton-on-Tees?
UKIP, like I did last time.
Right, OK, fine. Very good. Tommy, thank you very much. Your texts and tweets, I don't want a general election, but if it could stop all the delays over Brexit, then it could be the best thing. Though there is a risk it might delay Brexit even more. That's from BB. Well, we have discussed that. Freddie from Cambridge made the point there's always risks. There are always risks holding elections, and I get that. But I don't think the risk is all that big, frankly, and I think it would make things much clearer, and it would stop the whinging from Lord Heseltine and Tony Blair and Nick Clegg. Oh, no, we didn't vote to leave the single market. I'm absolutely certain that we did, but a general election might clean it up completely. Now is the time for a general election. The Lib Dems, Scottish Nationalists and Labour would promise to undo Brexit. Well, yeah, that is... somebody else raised that. Would this be... James did, didn't he? This would be, perhaps they try and use it to rerun the referendum. I don't believe the Labour Party would be mad enough to do that. I genuinely don't. Jean says on Facebook, I'm Scottish and live in England. I voted to leave the EU, but I do not want the UK broken up. Jean, I actually think, I have to say, that the chances of, and we did this a couple of nights ago, but the chances of Scotland voting to leave the United Kingdom with the prospect of going into a European Union that would make them sign a treaty committing them to joining the euro, I do not believe that is going to happen. Actually, I think that the union is stronger, actually, since Brexit than it was before. That's my view. What does Terry in Streatham think? Terry, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. First of all, can I just say it is a real honour and a privilege just to speak to you, because I never voted until I was in my mid-40s, and I voted because of you. And through all the rubbish that you get, all the rubbish that you put up with through people in the media and presenters on LBC mispronouncing your surname, but you still carry on.
Yeah, that's the least of my problems, Terry, I can promise you.
I can imagine. I don't think we should have a general election because under the system, whether it's right or wrong, we elect a party, we don't elect a person. And we elected the Tories. We didn't elect Cameron. We didn't elect May. We elected the Tories, and I didn't hear James call up, but I do agree that politicians like Farron will try to turn it into effectively a second referendum.
And that's your worry, Terry, yeah?
Yes, yeah. I think what we need to do is that Brexit has taken over British politics now. Everything else is secondary. So we really need to get the ball rolling and then get the country back on track.
You make that point very strongly and very well. But what about the allegations, serious allegations, and fine, and perhaps even next week criminal prosecutions? Because we've seen, the Conservative Party under its previous leadership, abusing, just ignoring, in fact, the law completely. What does May do to clean up British politics?
Well, I understand that point. My understanding with that is that in the areas like Thanet, for example, is that there would be a by-election. Those MPs' seats should be called void, and there should be by-elections. But from the calls that I've heard coming through tonight, I know it's just a snapshot, I really don't think there is an appetite for a general election. And unfortunately, the common consensus is that politics is corrupt. It will always be corrupt. It's just how corrupt will it be?
Yeah. No, Terry, thank you. And you ringing in and saying that I got you interested in politics enough to go out to vote, really makes me very happy indeed. In fact, I met a bloke in the street the week after the referendum. He said, "Oh, Mr. Farage, I voted in the referendum because of you." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." He said, "Yes, I voted Remain." So I guess there's some on both sides, Terry, but thank you very much indeed for your call. And lastly tonight, I'm going to go to David in Croydon. David, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Nigel. Thank you for taking the call.
Is it time for a vote?
Subject to various things that have been happening, I don't think we really need any further obstacles that might delay the whole situation. I understand the reasons that you're talking about, but really and truly, I think without enough excitement, what with the House of Lords and the politicians themselves, I mean, it's going to cause an unnecessary delay, in my opinion. One of the things I would like to ask you, because it's something which I've never been able to understand. Since Ted Heath through to David Cameron, with the possible exception of Margaret Thatcher, the whole of the political constitution in all colours parties have known exactly what the European Union was meant for, and that our government was going to be subservient to the government of the European Union.
Yep. Well, it has been, David, hasn't it?
The public were kept in the dark all the way along, and they've never had any openness about it. But what I can't understand is, if I were coming to be Prime Minister of this country, why on earth would I vote for our Parliament to be subservient to another higher government in Europe?
David, they did it for 40 years. They gave away the ability of us to govern our own country. They even gave away their own power in many ways. That, I guess, in many ways, David, is why we voted Brexit. But I'm going to have to end it there. My final thought is I think we need a general election to clean up British politics. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back on Monday from 7. Coming up at 10 o'clock, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Ian Payne.
Thank you very much indeed, Nigel. Coming up this evening after 9 o'clock, it's the Property Hour. Get your calls in. This hour, though, it's Donald Trump, who has had his revised travel ban blocked by another US judge. The judge in Maryland ruled it was unconstitutional and discriminated against Muslims. It follows a similar court ruling in Hawaii yesterday. Mr. Trump, though, has been seeking to ban travellers from 6 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the US. He's now threatening to take the issue to the Supreme Court. We're going to win. We're going to keep our citizens safe, he says. And he's also still firing on all cylinders about that phone tapping. Today, a Senate committee has concluded the president's phones were not bugged by the surveillance services. Do you think it's time now for Mr. Trump to admit, I was wrong?
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the government says it won't enter into negotiations about a second independence referendum with the Scottish government. Nicola Sturgeon says she wants a vote because of Brexit. Scottish National Party MP Craig McCaig has told LBC there's now even more bad